He hadn't spoken her name in years, but still felt it tremble in his chest. Every time the wind moved through the trees, she had vanished without a sound, leaving only silence and the kind of absence that grows louder with time. He told himself it was over that. What they'd shared couldn't have been real, but sometimes in dreams, he still saw wings cutting through golden dusk and woke with tears on his face. Now the lake lay frozen, the sky empty until a shape came crashing down through the clouds, a scream of wind, a shatter of ice, and in that moment with cold surging up around him and her eyes locked on his, through the freezing dark, he knew the years had meant nothing. The distance was a lie, and what lived between them had never died, only slept, waiting for this moment to burn again. Every morning he rose before the sun, not out of discipline but habit. Brewed coffee he barely tasted stood by the window longer than necessary, eyes drifting toward the tree line where the frost clung like breath, held too long. The house was quiet, always quiet, filled with the soft creak of old wood and the hum of appliances that made the silence feel louder. He kept her feather on the shelf beside the door. Never touched it, but dusted around it carefully, as if, disturbing it, might unspool the thread he still clung to. He walked the same trail every evening, boots pressing into snow already hardened by the cold, his gaze always scanning the sky without meaning to. He'd pause at the same place by the lake's edge, a small clearing where the ice spread out, flat and perfect, and the wind carried no sound, just the echo of a time when the sky wasn't empty. Sometimes his hand would twitch as if remembering the feel of feathers, the weight of trust, and when the cold bit hardest into his skin. He welcomed it because pain at least proved something was still there, something that hadn't fully gone still. He never said her name aloud, but it sat beneath everything, like a breath held beneath words. And in that suspended life, in the rhythm of repetition and restraint, he lived a kind of half-life, not broken, just waiting. It happened in summer, when the sky was too blue and the wind too still, and the world gave no warning. One day she was there, cutting through the air like fire, and the next the sky was empty, and the trees watched without speaking. He waited at their usual place by the lake every morning, breath held tight in his chest, eyes scanning the horizon until it blurred into nothingness. He told himself she'd return, that maybe she'd flown farther this time, but as the days stretched thin and hollow, something in him began to fracture. He called her name once out loud, and the sound of it breaking in his throat frightened him more than the silence that followed. He searched the cliffs, the forest, the wide sky growing smaller each day with every unanswered moment until the ache became too heavy to carry, and he folded into himself like a page closing. The world dimmed, lost its color, conversations became shapes in the air, people became noise. He nodded, smiled, disappeared inside everything. The trail to the lake grew over, but he still knew every turn, every route. He stepped over the way. You remember pain by muscle, not by mind. Time didn't soften anything. It simply dulled the urgency, turned the sharp edges inward, until grief lived inside him like breath. Quiet, constant, inescapable. It was not forgetting, it was the opposite. Remembering too deeply, too completely, and being unable to reach what was lost. He stopped expecting the sky to offer anything, and the stillness inside him became his only companion. Let me pause here for a moment and ask you, where are you listening from right now? Have you ever experienced something like this when someone, a person, or maybe even an animal, remembered you after so many years apart? That quiet moment of recognition, like time never really passed. If stories like this speak to something in you, don't forget to follow. There's so much more ahead that just might find its way into your heart. It began with a sound that didn't belong, a sharp crack splitting the air like memory breaking loose from the deep. Caleb had walked the lake's edge in silence, as he always did, half there, half somewhere else. When it happened so fast, the sky seemed to rip open, and something heavy spiraled down, feathers flashing dark against the snow. The ice groaned, then fractured, and the shape hit the surface with a thud that sent shock through his bones. He froze, breath caught somewhere between panic and something older, something wild. A flurry of wings flailed on the broken ice-fighting water that pulled with quiet violence, and in that chaos, something impossible flickered. Recognition, like a forgotten name whispered in the dark. His feet moved before thought could catch up, crashing through snow, slipping toward the breaking ice, heart hammering louder than the wind. Logic screamed. It couldn't be her, couldn't be after all these years. But the feeling rose faster than fear. What if it was? What if she had found her way back to this place? To him, hope burned sudden and fierce and unbearable, and he hated it because it hurt, because it mattered, because he hadn't let himself believe in anything for so long. And now, here it was, reckless and alive. He reached the edge of the ice, dropped to his knees, eyes locked with hers just for a second, golden, fierce, afraid and familiar. And in that moment, the years collapsed, and all that remained was the bond that had never really broken. His voice cracked as he called her, name a name. He hadn't spoken in so long it tasted like fire, Ashara. And she didn't fly, didn't flee, only fought to stay above the surface, so he went to her into the freezing black. Because some moments ask for nothing but action, no promises, no certainty. Just the aching pull of something too powerful to ignore. His arms closed around her soaked, trembling body, the weight unfamiliar, and yet so known, as if muscle remembered what memory had tried to forget the cold bit into his skin. But he didn't feel it, not really. All his senses narrowed to the sound of her breathing, shallow and ragged and real. He knelt in the snow, cradling her gently, as though the wrong touch might wake him from something too fragile to last. Her feathers were heavy with ice, her wings twitching. Not in fear, but in instinct, and still she did not fight him. Her head lay just beneath his chin. And in that small contact, everything inside him surged. Her scent, sharp and wild and unmistakable, filled his lungs, and time folded in on itself, the silence around them thick and reverent. Not the kind that comes from absence, but the kind that comes from awe. He looked down and met her eyes, golden still, though dulled by exhaustion and cold. And in them he saw not just an eagle, but her. The way she used to glide down from the cliffs, the way she once tilted her head when he laughed too loudly, the way she had always known him, and suddenly he couldn't breathe. Not from cold, but from the ache that bloomed so fast it stunned him. She blinked, slowly, her gaze holding his with something deeper than instinct. And in that moment, something clicked, quiet as a heartbeat, loud as a storm. The knowing, the remembering, it passed between them like light through cracks in stone, and the fear that maybe he was wrong. Maybe this was just hope, dressing itself up as truth dissolved because she was still there beneath the years, beneath the wildness, beneath the silence, and she saw him, the way no one else ever had. No words came. Not even a whisper, just breath and snow, and the warmth that began to rise between them as the wind softened and the sky began to close itself again over the place where something lost had finally returned. She stayed near him in the days that followed, perched quietly on the wooden beam just outside his window, watching with steady eyes that blinked slow and calm and full of something deeper than instinct. He moved carefully around her, speaking in low tones, not to tame her, but to let her know he was still there, still the same. He laid food gently near her, never forced it, just waited until she came to it on her own. And the first time she took it with a single careful motion, his throat tightened, not from relief, but from the tenderness of it. Her trust still lived there, beneath the surface, and slowly so did his every small gesture. Between them became a thread. The way she followed him a few steps down the path, the way her head turned, when he laughed at his own awkwardness, the way her wing brushed his arm by accident. Or maybe not each of these moments planted something fragile and alive in the soil of his silence. He found himself humming again once without realizing it, and when he stopped, she looked at him with that old sideways tilt, and something inside him broke in the best way. He sat outside with her at dusk, feeling the chill settle in, and didn't mind. For the first time in years, he felt the cold and didn't welcome it as punishment, but simply noticed it, like weather, not like pain. And when she finally took flight again, slicing through the sky, strong and silent, his heart seized not with fear of losing her, but with awe that she had come back down. She circled, then returned, landing beside him. And in that choice, in that simple act, the world shifted not. Loudly, not dramatically, but like morning breaking on a long dark night, they went back to the lake together, no longer as boy and eagle, but as something whole, something weathered and still enduring. And as they stood side by side with the snow falling, soft around them and the wind moving gently through the trees, he understood something, not in words, but in being. Some connections are not broken by time or silence or even loss. They only sleep, waiting for the right moment to wake. And when they do not return us to who we were. They return us to who we were always meant to be. Some bonds ask for no explanation. They speak in glances, in quiet returns, in the way a wild creature chooses not to leave, and a broken soul begins to breathe again. They survive distance and silence and the long cold of forgetting, not because they are loud, but because they are true. This was never about taming or holding on. It was about remembering, about finding each other in the stillness after everything had fallen, away and seeing that nothing was truly lost, only waiting just beneath the surface. And when they found each other again, not as they were, but as they had become, the world didn't shift with thunder. It exhaled, and in that breath they both began again. Not from the start, but from the moment that mattered, from the moment they remembered who they were to each other and what it means to be seen and still chosen.